We have now seen how we can, based on the templates, generate an ASP.NET Core MVC application from both Visual Studio and the command line interface. I will, as mentioned earlier, use Visual Studio further in this course, but from a code perspective, all is exactly the same. As you may have noticed, in both cases, quite a few files were generated. Some are particular to the project type you generate, while others always get generated. Let us start exploring which files are generated and what their role is, well, in this part here. When we will start working on Bethany SpiceShop very soon, we will actually start from the ASP.NET Core empty web application template. When we let Visual Studio execute this template, we get the project structure we see here in the screenshot. Not a lot will be generated for us, which you could have expected, since it was the empty template after all. We can see that a solution is generated and in there a project is created. In the root of the project, a number of items have been generated. Connected services allows us to reference other services. Now we won't be using that in this course. Dependencies will list all references we have from our project, for example, to NuGet packages. Under properties, a JSON file will be generated called launchSettings.json. We will look at this file in the demo. It is used when running the application. Maybe most importantly, there's also a code file which is generated in the root of the project, and that is the program.cs file, containing, in fact, the program class. Program will, in fact, be the very focus of this module, as we will be adding quite a fair bit of code to this file. Finally, another JSON file is generated, appsettings.json. I will use appsettings to store configuration information. We'll add the connection string to our database in this file later. If, on the other hand, you let Visual Studio execute the web application MVC template, you'll get, as we already saw, a more complete application. On top of what we got with the empty template, without going into much detail here, you will see a folder for controllers, models, and views. Hence, the MVC approach is already applied using this template. I'll rather explain you in detail what is happening, so we won't be using this template in this course. We'll use the empty template as said. But notice that in the root of the project, that program.cs file is there again. It really must be an important file. One other folder is generated here by the template, and that is www.root folder. More on that folder in just a minute. For completeness sake, this is what we get when we execute the Razor Pages template. I hope you remember from the previous module that Razor Pages is another way of creating your ASP.NET Core application. It's one of those application frameworks like ASP.NET Core MVC. Where the MVC project generated the models, views, and controllers folders with some sample code in there, this template will generate the pages folder. The www.root folder is generated as part of this project too, and surprise, surprise, program.cs is also generated again. The www.root folder is a bit of a special folder. It's referred to as the web root directory. It won't contain our application server-side code, but instead it will contain all static files. So images, CSS files, and JavaScript files typically. In other words, files that will be requested by the browser and that are just downloaded to the client. We can store static files in this folder and its subfolders, and they are accessible using a relative path from this directory. Say that, for example, you have stored image 1 in this www.root folder, and your website URL is bethanysspiceshop.com. Well, then by default, this image is reachable via bethanysspiceshop.com/image1.jpg. So the root of your site points to the root of this www.root folder. And this is in fact the only place where you should be storing static files. If you place them outside of this folder, they won't be accessible. All ASP.NET Core templates will also generate a CSProj file, so a project file. Each .NET 6 project has a project file, and that contains vital project information. First, the project SDK is set to Microsoft.NET.SDK.web, and that is in fact already giving us some advantages. It is the default for ASP.NET Core projects, and it will, behind the scenes, bring in a reference to the ASP.NET Core shared framework, aka Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.app. That reference basically brings in support for many of the common types we will use in any ASP.NET Core application. In other words, this implicitly brings in a bunch of references to assemblies that pretty much every ASP.NET Core application will need. As you can see, the file is pretty clean. Indeed, by default, there are no other references added. There's a single property group node, and it says that we'll use .NET 6, and by default, the template will also enable nullable reference types, which is now the default. And also, implicit usings are enabled. The latter will generate at compile time a list of using statements that are very common in ASP.NET Core projects. Since the generated usings are global, it means that we don't need to repeat these anymore in other files. This is a feature that actually came with C# 10, and that is now also being used from ASP.NET Core projects. We will later in the course need to bring in references to types which are not available in the by default referenced ASP.NET Core shared framework. We can add references to other packages as we would do so in other project types. For example, through NuGet. And the result is that a package reference is added, as we can see here. This reference points directly to the NuGet package you may want to use.